Hello, greetings. Welcome, everyone. My name is David.
And I'm Tim.
And we want to say thank you for tuning into Johnny Has the Keys podcast, an examination of horror and science fiction films and television, fantasy, whatever we can come up with. Each episode will cover some of your favorite movies and maybe some you've never seen, but you should, giving our opinions on what worked, what didn't, and what effect they may have had on us. So, Tim, this is our first podcast. How's that feel?
Feels a little odd, and my voice is somewhat disembodied.
Yes, well, it would be, because it's not connected to your body. It's going out into the ether.
Yeah.
So I think, since this is our first one, we might want to talk about, why is this our first one? Why are we even doing this? I mean, what kind of spurred the idea? We might want to share with everybody what kind of spurred the idea that we wanted to jump into the world of podcasting.
For me, I listen to audio a lot during the day. I used to listen to satellite radio, and then we got rid of it, and I turned to podcast as an alternative. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I know what's out there in the areas of what I like, and some of it is really not good. And you and I both had experience in the past of doing shows as far as theater and some film. And I thought, and I was glad you actually brought it up, that maybe we could do something that would be worthwhile.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm fairly a newbie, a novice for podcasting. I haven't listened to a lot, and well, at least before we had started discussing this, and had I knew it was out there. I knew people did them. I knew there was a variety of topics, but I never really thought about doing it or even listening to them for enjoyment. And then I kind of got hooked when a couple of people mentioned them and mentioned how they listened to them all the time. And then when you and I talked, you listened to them all the time. And so I started finding some that we liked, and we started sharing with each other and just kind of said, hey, we could do this. So here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. Now, why did we pick the topic that we're talking about, which is basically horror and science fiction? I mean, I know horror has meant a lot to you. Science fiction has meant a lot to me, but in what ways? Why do we think that other people want to listen to us talk about it?
Well, we've known each other for quite some time. I'm not sure if we want to go into age just yet.
A few decades long,
yes.
Yeah.
Long enough that both of us, me in particular with horror, I've been obsessed with it since I was a child, but I've been reading magazines like Fangoria pretty much since its birth.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a huge thing that we have in common. I mean, Fangoria both attracted us. Me also for my science fiction angle. Mine was Sin Fantastique. But, both of us grew up. I grew up on Shop. Yeah, Starlog. I have the first one. I have a box downstairs, and I actually have the first 20 Starlogs.
It's got an episode guide to Star Trek in it. I have it.
It does. Yeah, it's awesome. and we've got I grew up listening to Shock Theater. Watching that on Saturdays. Saturdays it was all the classics. I got to see, the Bug-Eyed Monster movies and Creature from the Black Lagoon and It Came from Outer Space and all the classics. And that's how I grew up, was watching all of that. And then Famous Monsters of Filmland.
I knew you were going there.
See? Yeah.
I was just about to say it. Forey Ackerman.
Yeah, we're kind of dating ourselves, but at that time, that was the only way we could connect as fans was, through the magazines and the articles and the pictures and everything. There was no social media, of course.
Yeah, or computers for that much.
Yeah, true. So it was very interesting that even though when we were younger, high school age, that kind of stuff, we didn't know each other. We had very similar backgrounds as far as what we liked, what the magazines we read, of course, the shows we watched, the television, and then when we finally became friends and started hanging out together, we realized, oh wow, we've got the same interests happening all the time.
Right, and being artistic, for lack of better words, as far as both of us being into theater, that's kind of a nerdy culture. And when you look at movies like Frankenstein that have similar themes, where the monster is kind of the underdog and you kind of root for them, you can also see kind of a parallel going there with our lives as theater nerds. And, that's why we gravitate to movies of a similar nature.
Yeah, I would think that's probably true. I think a lot of people enjoy the genres just because of, where it takes them, where it transports them, the feeling it gives them.
Correct.
Whether it's, oh, I love to be scared because it gets my adrenaline pumping, or whether it's, oh, I love, science fiction because it makes me, think there's a better human spirit out there and we can, go beyond and do stuff.
Or you can go, and I'm paraphrasing, to the Stephen King definition where you think, well, my life is pretty bad, but at least I'm not being chased through the woods by a maniac with an axe.
There you go. There's that, something we all enjoy not having happen to us.
Right. So you can actually look at horror as uplifting.
It is. It makes your whole day sort of thing. It makes your life seem so much better.
Yeah. You think your life's bad. You should have an alien burst out of your chest.
Yeah. See, that'll ruin the whole weekend. Okay, cool. So I think for our listeners, we've kind of said a little bit about us. I know that you are an author, and you've been a published author, and you've published horror. You've owned your own business. You've done a variety of stuff. I think both of us have done a variety of things in our lengthy careers.
We're Renaissance men.
But I mean, we're shared. We're nerds with shared interests, I guess, is a way of saying it. We both love the genres. We both love podcasting now, hopefully, and being able to go to new areas, I guess, or new exciting levels, kind of thing.
I'm just waiting for the Star Trek music to start.
That's true. It should be there. Risk is our business. No.
New frontiers.
There you go, which is what we're doing with this. So we hope to, every episode, cover a topic, whether it's a movie or a couple of movies or a television series or something like that. And we're each going to try to give our opinions, what we like, what we don't like, and what you should watch or you shouldn't watch, sort of thing, in our opinions. But so for this first one, our inaugural, our debut, as they say, I think maybe we want to conduct a little interview with each other. Is that what we talked about? Yeah?
Yeah, that's cool. Just to let people get to know who we are and why we're crazy enough to do this.
Yeah. So you want to go first?
What inspires you, David? Not necessarily in horror or sci-fi, just what inspires you in general.
What inspires me is, I think, creativity and different perspectives. Seeing things from a different lens, so to speak, to use a phrase. But I mean, part of the job I do now as an entertainment consultant is work with clients on making their dreams come true, sort of thing. So if they have a vision of something, or sometimes they don't have a vision, they just know the end result they want, and it's up to me to kind of give them a vision. So I kind of like that whole perspective and being able to look at those things and take a client, what they like, what they don't like, and seeing if I can make that better. And better for them. That's probably one of the ones that's probably my inspiration, or where my inspiration comes from, is seeing things differently than other people. And I hear that a lot. People say, I never saw it that way. What about you?
The first thing that comes to my mind is music. Nothing puts me in the mood for writing like hearing either a really strong melody or turn of phrase. There are particular bands I can always play that will get me in the mood for writing. Another inspiration of that's in the similar line, it's all entertainment related, would be reading a great written paragraph, a very superb turn of phrase, or seeing it orchestrated on film. So cool. I guess my inspiration comes from creativity as well, or some kind of artistic expression.
Mm-hmm.
So I feed off of other creativity. I am a creativity cannibal.
There you go.
That would be what inspires me.
What was the last thing you read?
Well, I've been reading Who Goes There by John, I think it's John W. Campbell or Joseph W. Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
That was the inspiration for The Thing because we're considering an upcoming episode involving John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, that's good. Yes.
And I also started the noir classic Black Wings Has My Angel.
Oh, who's that by?
It's by Elliot Chase with a Z, Chaze. And it's part of I'm in a reading group on Goodreads, and we're reading that. and someone mentioned the other day that Black Wings Has My Angel sounds like a title Yoda would come up with, which I thought was hilarious because it does. So that's two of the things I'm into right now, and I usually have 2 or 3 books going, if you know me.
You mentioned music. What kind of music do you listen to?
Not much has changed in that category since you knew me in the 80s. I am a hard rock go-to through and through. I almost daily listen to the Foo Fighters. I would say Dave Grohl is one of my idols. I think he's just done everything, and he continues to do things. I mean, he's directing now. He directed a couple of things for HBO.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I listen to the Foo Fighters. I still listen to hard rock. Alice Cooper is still up there. I think he's one of the most underrated songwriters ever. My musical tastes are eclectic as well. I listen to disco. I listen to divas like Barbara Streisand and Cher. I listen to traditional jazz a lot when I want to chill.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but for inspiration, it's primarily hard rock.
Now, a question I ask: Are you a lyric person or a music person?
I know this sounds cliche, I guess, but both. It depends on what I'm needing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a good riff on a guitar or a driving beat to energize me would be, the music part of it. But then to hear, the phrasing of the lyrics, can, like I said earlier, inspire me as far as writing. So, but I mean, like if I want to chill, I'm going to listen to jazz, and that's predominantly without vocals. It's
right,
piano, low key, traditional jazz. I'm not talking about smooth jazz on FM radio. I'm talking about Miles Davis, that kind of stuff.
Right. See, I'm almost exclusively music. I can listen to a song, people talked about, there should be a game show. I was talking with some friends the other night saying, there should be a game show where it's that lyric game where they play a song and everybody has to type in what they think the lyrics are because so many people get it wrong all the time, like Space Cowboy and those kind of things. But I could listen to a song 3,000 times and still not know the words to the song.
Or you could be singing something that you thought were the words to the song, and they're completely wrong.
Correct. Completely
There are still
wrong.
Elton John songs that I've been singing since I was a child, and I don't have any idea what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally true. But I love music. I've always loved music, and rhythm, and it's if you asked me the same questions, what do I normally listen to? 90% of the time, I listen to soundtracks. I listen to, and by soundtracks, I mean traditional, old school soundtracks, not soundtracks which are a compilation of pop music that were in the movie.
Yes, you used to do that. That's been
Correct.
with you a while.
Yeah, so I always do that. I still do that. Westworld, the new series that's on HBO, the soundtrack and the music for that series is awesome. And I bought it the day it came out, and listened to it, a lot over the past few months.
And that's with like the pop tunes being done in ragtime style.
Yeah, like player piano style, but also the
Right.
just the normal the background soundtrack music. It's the same composer who does Game of Thrones,
Oh, okay.
and he's really strong, really good. He uses instrumentation that I like a lot, piano and cello and those kind of things. But just has incredible scores, if you want to say instead of soundtracks.
Yeah.
Since we say soundtrack now, and everybody thinks, oh, that's the all the background songs that were used on Riverdale this
Yeah,
week.
the new Taylor
Yeah,
Swift hit or whatever. Yeah.
right.
One more thing about music.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, as far as soundtracks, when I think of albums, which what we were listening to, albums and cassettes, if you remember those, I seem to remember you having Ennio Morricone's The Thing
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even The Shining
Both.
on. Yeah, yeah. I remember listening to those when we were like building sets and stuff. That's great mood music, isn't it? Let's listen to horror movie soundtracks while we build sets.
Yeah, those two and Conan was another one that I listened to a
Yes.
lot, and Altered States, which is another one that you can't really find anywhere anymore. But really, Shostakovich kind of weird, bizarre music that he used in Altered States.
Yeah. When we were toying around with ideas for questions, the music question was one I had always intended to ask you because not many people know this, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again, but we really haven't hung out since the late 80s. We've known each other because we live in separate states. But when I was last around you often, I mean, the music you were listening to was like White Snake and Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, and Guns N' Roses.
Yeah?
And I was just wondering if your taste had changed as far as rock. Or do you even listen to rock anymore?
Oh, I do.
Pop.
I do, but I listen to, it's still old stuff for me as far as rock goes. I listen to Pink Floyd a great deal. And that's probably my go-to comfort music is Pink. It sounds odd. Roger Waters is my comfort music.
I like things about building walls that isolate me.
Yes, it's great. Final cut. But yeah, I still listen to classic rock. I still listen to what they call old school rock, which is like the Bon Jovis, the Guns N' Roses, that kind of stuff. To me, that's rock and roll, so to speak.
Yeah, I do too. I would say the newest stuff I listen to primarily would probably be from the 90s. I don't really go too far into the new. I mean, other than, the superstar like Adele or somebody that I hear fairly often.
Yeah, but to me, I mean, since we're on the music thing, this is our science fiction horror podcast. We're going to talk about music. But the music, the modern music is so attuned to vocals. And I think, American Idol, The Voice, all of those kind of things kind of added to that prevalence now in music. But everything tends to be so much more vocal than it is an emphasis on the music and the song and the musicians.
Yeah, and have you noticed that some of them, and this is going to sound so grandma of me, how many, I can't even tell apart. And I don't know if it's because of the mixing. But a lot of the young singers, especially females like Ariana Grande and some of the other ones that I don't know their name, I can't tell them apart.
Right.
I mean, you put Cher on, you know that's Cher.
Yeah, it's her style, her character, also her, the timbre of her voice, the key of her songs, and her instrumentation usually.
Right.
We don't talk about instrumentation more with musicians usually, with artists. We don't talk about the piano player behind Adele. We talk about Adele and her voice.
Right.
And it's very interesting that when we were younger and listening to music and everything else was before everything became very synth and very electronic sounding and all of that. But vocal has become what everybody considers music. Even now, it's even spilled into like Broadway. Hamilton. Hamilton is not known for its melodies. It's known for its vocals. It's rap music.
Right. It's modernness.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to, talking with people and saying, okay, when's the last time you heard a really good guitar solo in a song? Or when's the last time a song started and had, I don't know, 8, 10, 16 measures of an introduction before it just literally hit the beat 4 times and dove right into the lyrics?
Yeah, I think you hit it when you said vocalist and singers. It's almost as if we're concentrating more on singers now than we are bands,
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
or at least they dominate the charts and pop music
Yep.
and media.
So agree.
That's why I turned to hard rock because that's predominantly bands. And the last time I heard a good solo was yesterday on a Foo Fighters record because I listen to them almost every day.
Well, there you go. And tying it back to what we said earlier, I mean, one of the things obviously that we're both passionate about with music is music takes us away. It allows us to create a particular mood, whether that mood is, your relaxing jazz or whether it's me, I fly a lot for work and I have a particular playlist that I have together that I always start when we're descending into wherever I'm landing. And it usually times out kind of perfectly. Serendipity works, and the way I look out the window or what I see and everything else, the music affects that. So it makes
Oh,
landing so
wow.
much more exciting.
David Horton, this is the soundtrack of your life.
That's it. That's it. I put that together myself. So,
Yeah. That's kind of cool.
but so it's kind of
Always
like
editing.
so it's kind of like why we want to do what we're doing now. We explore these same movies because of what it makes us feel, what it makes us think, that sort of thing.
Right. And, well, we're creating something
Definitely.
and learning at the same time. Yeah, I interrupted you. I went back to music. You had something I think you were
Well, this
going
whole
toward.
first thing is just for us to, for hopefully listeners to our huge fandom that's going to develop, to just know a little bit about us and why would I listen to these guys anyway. So, well, here's a more topical or practical one. What's the last thing you watched on television?
Survivor, all 3 hours of it last night. I know that's so cheesy. I am not a huge reality fan at all. I tried for a while to watch reality programming, and it hits a nerve with me and gets really aggravating because I know most of it's not real. But I have been watching Survivor since episode one, and they just completed their 34th season last night.
Yeah, you love Survivor. I know that you watch it religiously almost.
I do, and I get caught up in it, and I was not happy with any of the three finalists last night, but it was joyous watching them get picked apart by the jury because I didn't think any of them deserved to be there. Anyway, that's the last thing I watched. The thing I'm currently streaming that I'm not through with yet is Sense8 on Netflix.
Uh huh. Uh huh. J. Michael Straczynski. Yeah, good.
Who?
It's J. Michael Straczynski. It's the same guy that did Babylon 5.
But it's the Wachowski sisters,
Yes.
formerly brothers.
Yeah, they're the directors and co-writers,
Oh,
and,
okay.
and J. Michael Straczynski's the writer.
Oh, okay. I didn't. I guess it's a collaboration between the three.
Yeah, and that's why it has such
Okay.
an arc story. It's such a long, long, huge arc that's developing because that's kind of what J. Michael's known for
Okay.
creating that whole multi-arc seasonal story.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a great pairing of them. We need to talk about that one
Yeah.
episode. That
It's
would be a good.
it's. I guess you would classify it as science fiction because there's, you know, the plot is about these 8 people that are connected, even though they live all over the world. They're connected like telepathically. It's fascinating to me, and some of it's a little indulgent. I mean, there's a lot of pretty people on there. They're naked a lot, and there's a lot of sex being had. But I still like the plot as well. It's not like it's just for titillation.
Interesting. Yeah, I do
So,
think
yeah.
I marvel at, coming from a directing background and everything, I marvel at just the complexity of putting that show together because you have to have multiple locations with multiple people doing
And lots of
multiple
money.
scenes. Yeah, that are all edited together. So I
Yeah.
look that way and I suddenly see somebody, and then I look again and I don't see them, and it's just, and then they see me, but they don't see me in their scene. It's kind of very unique the way it's all edited together too.
I think that what they saved from casting predominantly unknown international actors is spent on what you're talking about. I can't tell you how many scenes are shot on location in other countries and have more than 100 people in them. I mean, there is money all over that show because it cannot be cheap to film.
So, if there was one film that you would like to remake, or one film based on a novel you would like to see made, what would that film be?
You know, I thought about this last night. Okay, I know exactly what I would do. I would like to remake for I guess for the third time, it would be the fourth version, I Am Legend. And I would like to do that book literally. I don't want them to change anything, except maybe the dialogue being a little more modern. You know as well as I do, that book is one of my favorites. It's a seminal book that has inspired countless imitations as well as countless versions of itself. It inspired Night of the Living Dead, which in turn inspired a million other zombie things. And it's really, it's not about zombies, it's about vampires. It was written in the 50s. And the most faithful adaptation was with Vincent Price, and it's just not that good. They didn't have any money. I want to say it was Roger Corman or some kind of AIP thing. And then, of course, they did the Omega Man, which to me is hilarious, but still, it's a favorite of mine because it just reminds me of watching 70s TV as a child. But then they did this latest incarnation with Will Smith where it's like The Strain. The vampires are like on steroids, and there's just no way he would live because they're superhuman. I like the whole idea of the isolation. To me, the isolation is like a character in that novel. And I like the fact that he is going nuts. As you know, the novel that I wrote is inspired from that as well. So that's the movie I would like to make, and I would like to make it the way he wrote it. So I don't know if that's answer enough. Yeah, I Am Legend.
I Am Legend?
Yeah, he's kind of a god to me. And
Well, I think to so many people.
Yeah, he was Stephen King's primary influence. And that's another thing we haven't mentioned, but we will in closing, I guess, is that a lot of this podcast is probably going to have to deal with influence, whether something was influential or, inspired by something else.
Which most things are.
Right.
Most things are taken from an original source that they may not even have realized that they had taken it from.
We've already talked about it. I was talking about creativity cannibalism. I mean, we do it with music, I may not be I may not be writing about this song, but this song is inspiring me to write something else.
Yes. Very good.
Those are the
like
keys. And Johnny has the keys.
Johnny has the keys.
Well, did you want to kick in your own make or remake of a movie? Did you have an idea of one?
What would I want to make or remake? I would not want to remake because I struggle with remakes a lot. So
there's not many good ones,
especially if they decide to describe them as a reimagining. I really have an issue with that. And yes, to all you JJ fans, I'm a huge Star Trek devotee, and I'm disappointed in the reboots or reimagining. But we can talk about that at a later time when I can get up on my soapbox. Let's see, what would I want to make? I've always wanted, and this is not really in our genre vein, but it is sort of geeky. I've always wanted to see a great film adaptation of The Once and Future King by T.H. White, which was the combination of all of the Arthurian legends put into one huge epic saga story. I think it would make a really cool, one season for HBO or Showtime sort of thing.
I was going there. Yeah.
It would
It
be.
needs to be longer than a movie.
Oh yes, definitely, because
Yeah.
it's so epic. It would need to be, because it does. It covers it covers Uther even before Arthur, and then goes all the way through the Holy Grail and everything else, and Arthur going off to Avalon and all of that. And even though there have been versions of the Arthurian story, that book in particular, which takes more of a humanistic, I think, approach to the Arthurian legend, less mythic, more nuts and bolts, gritty, daily grind sort of thing, and more emotional. I think that's never been turned into a worthy film. So I'd like to do that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the way it could be adapted. It might even could be more than one season, because you could do single episodes with characters like Galahad or Lancelot,
True.
Mordred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. That would
Yeah,
be some good stuff.
Yeah, and it's fairly accurate as far as Idols of the King and everything else goes in Arthurian legends, and I think it would be dynamic and interesting, and our core of the podcast, which is the inspirations or the keys to doing a creative idea or creative cannibalism, as you said. There would not be a Game of Thrones if there had not been an Idols of the King or a Once a Future King, that sort of story of medieval family, working towards something with a supernatural element thrown in there. So
Right.
wizards and things. So what are we hoping to do in the future? What can listeners, if they've listened this long to us ramble on about each other, what can they hope to hear in the future from this podcast?
I think that what people can expect from this podcast would be, obviously they're going to have something in common with us as far as our love for the genres. We're going to talk about movies. We're going to talk about television. We're going to talk about inspiration as far as novels and legends, as you will, when you were talking about Idols of the King.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of fun to do a deeper exploratory, not necessarily to critique them, but to show the connections within the stories and the adaptations. And that's where the whole name for the podcast is coming from. Obviously, Johnny Has the Keys is a classic, hilarious line from Night of the Living Dead. But when we use it, it also is kind of a code for a key being a related element in a story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, you may say, oh, hey, there's a key. This, Westworld is very similar to Blade Runner. There are a lot of common themes there. Let's explore them.
Right.
So there's an example of something I think where we can go with this podcast. I also mentioned some, obviously, with I Am Legend.
Right. And I think both of us
And
have the
vampires and
backgrounds coming from, the various genres that we've explored, but also, you from writing, both of us from performance, me from direction, that sort of thing, that we can give at least our takes and our thoughts on where that comes from and what literary or other film inspirations kind of led, or connections led to these particular stories and plot lines and characters or whatever. I guess one maybe a generic question just for you would be, so, I mean, they'll figure it out as they listen to us, but basically, you're the horror expert. It's something that's dominated your life. It's something you love not only reading, but writing about. For me, it's always been science fiction, and, the science fiction elements of anything. So, but why horror for you? Why has horror always attracted you and always been a part of your life?
I guess going back to when I was a kid, I mean, I don't know if it's a nostalgia thing. I've always actually, and this sounds kind of morbid, I've always equated horror movies to comfort food. Nothing makes me feel more comforted, I guess, for lack of better words, than, sitting down and watching a favorite horror movie like Halloween. I know that just sounds so warped.
It sounds a little interesting, yes.
My sister was a horror movie fan. I think I even mentioned this on the website that as a kid, she was a teenager. She was like 12 when I was born, so she would have been, 16 when I was 4 or 5, and she didn't want to watch these movies by herself. So she would kind of force me to watch them with her. And I did the same thing with my nephews when I used to babysit them at a young age. Except she was showing me stuff like Dark Shadows, or I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
And I was showing them movies like Halloween and Magic. And
Anthony Hopkins, excellent.
yeah, that you talk about scary movie trailers. There is no reason. I mean, that should be one of the scariest movie trailers, and I can't find it anywhere on YouTube.
We should look that one up because that definitely would be one of the scariest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the trailer is on YouTube. I'm just saying in the compilations of scariest trailers, it's not in there, and it should be.
I used to have that
still
poster.
One of the scariest trailers.
I love that movie poster. I used to have it.
But other than that digression, so, I mean, I've been watching since I was a kid, so I've been kind of obsessed with it. Also, I'm a scaredy cat like Stephen King, so, being able to confront those fears is also a way of overcoming them. And writing them, as I also do, is a way of exercising them. But overall, like I said, if I am, home from work, sick, I may be on the couch with a blanket and some soup, but rather than watching something, modern, I would rather stick in, Reanimator or The Thing or Night of the Living Dead. And it's like, it's chicken soup for the soul, man.
It's so interesting you say comfort food to ones you've watched before. What about new horror? Like the first time you watch a horror movie, is that comforting or literally that's scary?
This is where I could go all grandpa, They don't make them like they did in the old days. But I mean, there are some good new horror movies out there, but to me, they're lacking because people think that CGI and jump scares take the place of good writing and mood and atmosphere, and they don't.
Here.
Nothing.
Well said.
I mean, really. I mean, and I thought the Blair Witch Project, even though that's not a newbie, that's 20 years old now almost. I thought it was a great idea, but I couldn't get past the jerky camera. I really, really got tired in that movie fast.
Yeah, I think it was a little assaultive as far as from the cinematography and the way it was just so much handheld.
And there's a lot of gimmick out there. All these paranormal activities, sure, do it once, like the Blair Witch Project, and it works. I don't want to see 4 of them.
Well, Cloverfield's the same way. Trying to use that handheld aesthetic and that whole first-person viewpoint kind of thing to tell the horror story doesn't really work because it's so jerky that we don't have that slow build or that suspense or what really makes something scary.
Right.
People have said
you've got to see
Jaws,
that new one, though.
People have said Jaws would not have been as scary had the shark actually worked as well as they'd wanted it because it didn't, he couldn't show it. So he had to kind of create that POV and create those moments where we're actually imagining something a lot worse than what's really he could show. And I think that's
true.
It's
funny that you mentioned that.
I think that's true of so many good horror movies. And, well, there's one that I watched recently, maybe we'll cover it on episode 2. It Follows is I think a good modern mood horror piece because it is so kind of slow on the build as far as what is actually scary about this.
Agreed.
And by giving it by giving the entity in it, let's say, or the monster, if we want to go for the cliche, a very slow moving pace physically makes it scarier. It's good. It's relentless. It will catch you eventually, but it's not screaming, running right up on your jump scare kind of horror.
You just gave me 3 keys.
Oh, there you go. Good.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of 3 films and things that relates to.
Well, good.
And that's why it's successful. That's why it's a successful modern example.
Well, maybe we should put that down as one we definitely want to discuss soon, as far as
Sure.
an episode goes.
Yeah, and we've both seen it recently too, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So that would be a good one for us to do.
Well, we did talk just a brief bit about why horror for me, why science fiction for you,
Good one.
and then we'll wrap it up.
For me, I've always been drawn to fantasy and the fantastical, and huge inspiration for me was even as a child. I mean, I remember, 6 and 7 years old actually watching Star Trek when Star Trek came on, and you know me well enough to know Star Trek is like my life's blood sort of thing. I love, and I'm classic Star Trek, and I like that the element of it's a better society, it's a better world, we can make things better, even though we're still sleeping with all the space babes and we have our phasers out all the time, kind of a Western. But science fiction in general has always expanded my mind, shown me a different perspective. I said earlier, my inspiration, I guess, in life is different perspectives. And I think science fiction always gives us a different perspective, whether it's Blade Runner with this fantastical world that he created, and the storytelling of what makes us human, and are we human, and if we create an AI, do we want it to be human? Or wouldn't it be scary if it's more human than we are? Kind of thing. Alien, which is one of my favorite movies, which is kind of a combo for us. It's a horror and a science fiction. But the world he creates, that fantastical world of that spaceship and that crew and taking humanity into a better place, sort of thing. It's always been what's attracted me to science fiction. Even when I read, I used to get those collections of, the top 50 short science fiction stories, Hugo winners kind of thing, and read it. That's where I first read Who Goes There, the story you mentioned about that was inspired the thing. Arena, which was by Frederick Brown, which was a great science fiction story, and ended up being they adapted it for a Star Trek episode. Yay! Plus for me.
I didn't realize that was a story.
Yeah, Arena was a short story that started out. So that was my reading as a kid. Before Stephen King came about and I found Stephen King, I read science fiction. And then when King came out, I read science fiction and horror because I loved all of his early works. You and I were both there when Carrie first came out, in hardback, in paperback, Carrie did. But, when The Shining came out, when Salem's Lot came out.
Mm-hmm.
And to read through those, that kind of hybrided my science fiction into I'm a total geek. I like sci-fi and horror. I like them both. So
I can remember running to Gateway Bookstore, or having my mother probably drive me to Gateway Bookstore when I found out Richard Bachman was Stephen King, and I wanted to go grab any books I could find that were Richard Bachman books. Of course, they were all gone.
That's a good thing we didn't explore. One of you used to work in a bookstore, right?
Yeah, I worked for Borders for years.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
So you stole all the books from there, right? And just read them and put them back
Well,
on
I
the
used
shelf.
to get a lot of ARCs, which are advanced reading copies. I used to get a lot of those.
See, and when I was the same way when I was a manager at a Blockbuster. I got to get all the early copies of all the movies, so I could, we
Yeah,
didn't
music
call them
too, 'cause
ARCs or whatever. But
they would be AVCs, advanced viewing copies.
yeah, we didn't have that acronym, but we had 7,000 other ones. So it was fun.
Yeah, we did too. So okay, we've heard about why horror, why sci-fi, and what exactly Johnny Has the Keys is. Why we chose that title for multiple reasons. Was there anything else you wanted to?
I think that basically covers us, and for this debut episode, I mean, basically what Tim and I wanted to do, speaking to the viewer, or the listener, what we wanted to do was just basically a little bit about ourselves, so you get to know us and what we feel and sound and think, and hopefully you'll come back and visit us and listen to all the podcasts and what you think.
I was going to say, I'm from the South, if y'all can't tell. So I got to
Really?
quit laughing.
No, they would never know.
Well, you are too, but you can't tell.
Not maybe not as bad, sort of thing, or as good, depending on how you want to look at it.
When I first started working for Borders in Washington, D.C., or in Virginia, Northern Virginia, I would be ringing them up at a cash register, and people would just shout states out at me. Like, Virginia's not the South. I guess it isn't. Northern Virginia really isn't the South. To them, it's not. But they would shout out, Texas, North Carolina, or whatever. They'd never get it right.
Interesting.
It's the hybrid of the Tennessee, Georgia, I think, but whatever.
It gives you a higher elevation of Southern, as they say.
I think it's because I have the drawl and the twang
There you
instead
go.
of either or.
Whereas I have fought, all my life not to have an accent, kind of thing. So it's been interesting.
Well, yeah, and when I was doing theater, I was trying not to, but since I've stopped doing it, I guess I've slipped back into it heavily. I'm sure it's worse than, I'm sure when I listen to this, I'm going to be like, oh my God, that's terrible. But
So that's been a little bit about us. We just thought you might like to get to know us a little bit better before we dive right into telling you what you should and shouldn't watch or like and not like. But don't worry, it's not going to be about us every week. In upcoming episodes, we're going to cover classic films. On the schedule so far, we got Night of the Living Dead, George Romero's masterpiece of cannibalistic horror. The movie that gave new meaning to pea soup, The Exorcist. And the only horror movie to sweep the Oscars, The Silence of the Lambs. So all of that we've got coming up. Our next episode, Tim, do you want to tell us what our next episode, the following the debut episode, is going to be about?
we're going to take on the tragedy of a remote Arctic research station and what happens when they discover something hidden in the ice. It's the classic The Thing. Primarily, we'll be talking about the John Carpenter version, or really the only version as far as we're concerned. We'll do what's best to tell you what's good and what's bad, and other great details and keys relating to other films and themes in the genre. So just be sure to tune in.
Awesome.
We'd like to thank you again for listening to Johnny Has the Keys podcast. You can contact us through our website, johnnyhasthekeys.com. And please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice. Johnny Has the Keys is supported in part via Patreon. For as little as a cup of coffee a month, help keep our podcast commercial free. The link is at the website. See you next show, and don't lose your keys.